Hello and welcome to the world of RuneScape, the series where I discuss the strengths of old school RuneScape and what differentiates it from its successor. Last time was a bit of an introduction. This time we will be touring through Tutorial Island. Tutorial Island was RuneScape's first real tutorial that ran all the way from the 2002 to 2008 servers. Afterwards, the game's tutorial went through a fair amount of changes before finally settling into what it is today. I think that out of all of RuneScape tutorials, Tutorial Island stands as the best introduction the game has ever had, and is personally one of my favorite tutorial levels of all time. Now, if you've played RuneScape before, you're probably questioning that last line. Generally speaking, Tutorial Island is the definition of a generic cookie cutter tutorial, with big yellow arrows always pointing you towards where you need to go, and NPCs telling you exactly what you need to do. But here's the thing, it might not be as inventive as, say, the intro stage to Mega Man X, or as seamless as the first fight in Shadow of the Colossus, but it does have its own strengths, just in different areas. Its strengths come in the form of being able to teach the player the necessary basics in a short amount of time, its ability to detach the tutorial from the main game altogether, and its ability to immediately establish the status of you, the player, within the world of RuneScape. I'll explain these more in detail, especially the last one, as we run through Tutorial Island from the very beginning. The first thing you're greeted with after you set up your account is a character creation screen. Pretty standard stuff, just pick from an assortment of skin colors, clothing, and hairstyles, and you're ready to go. Once you're finished, you'll notice that your character is standing in the middle of a room with a few other people and an arrow pointing to this conspicuous looking fellow over here. As instructed, left click him and you'll be talking to the RuneScape guide. He explains how to talk to other NPCs and how to open the player controls menu. If you haven't noticed, the game is pretty self-aware that you're doing a tutorial right now. I mean, the guy is called the RuneScape guide, and he says his job is to welcome all the new visitors. RuneScape tends to hang around the fourth wall a lot, and this is just one example of that. After you're finished talking to him, walk out the door and head down the path where you will find the survival expert. Here you will learn a few basic skills in the game. She hands you a tinderbox and a bronze axe. You can now click on one of the trees to chop it down and get some logs. Afterwards, you're told to use the tinderbox on the logs and your character bends down to start a fire. Next, the survival expert gives you a net so that you can catch some shrimp from this little pond over here. After you catch your shrimp, you're instructed to cook it. Click the shrimp to select it, use it on the fire, and immediately you burn it. It's at this point that a thought might drift into the player's head. There are many other moments in the tutorial that may provoke this thought, but there's a good chance that it might occur here. And that thought is, wow, I suck. Not me, but my character. My character sucks. I'm 2 minutes into the game and I just failed at something this simple. And here lies RuneScape's biggest strength, not only in its tutorial but in the game overall. It's not afraid to let the low-level player feel like a low-level player. In my opinion, a good MMO's best asset is its sense of progression. That's why they're built on these complex leveling systems. The high-level player is always going to be doing bigger and better things than the low-level player. That's why when someone starts an MMO and they see all their skills at level 1, there is an almost universal understanding that they are a noob, and what they're doing right now is not very important. It's expected that the game will get bigger and better as they progress through the leveling system. In order for a game to meet these expectations consistently, it's important for a beginner to feel like a beginner. Not just in terms of levels, but in terms of what the character can do, and how powerful the character feels in relation to the rest of the world. Tutorial Island does a great job at establishing that you're honestly not that great. There's nothing special about you at this point in the game at all. Think about what we've done so far. You get a poop-colored axe, you chop a tree, you take 2 attempts to light some logs on fire, you get on your hands and knees with a net to catch shrimp. This is a fishing skill, and you don't even get to catch normal-sized fish yet. You don't even get a damn fishing rod. You get a small net. And once you finally catch your tiny-ass shrimp, you bring it over to your fire, attempt to cook it, and proceed to burn it. You're a noob, you're bad, and the game wastes no time telling you that. You're just another adventurer learning the basics like everyone else. Now, to some people, this might seem like a negative. I'm sure some of the newer guys at Jagex saw it as one, which is why every single iteration of RuneScape's tutorial after Tutorial Island became progressively more extravagant. All of them doing their very damn best to make the player feel like they're important. Just compare the first minute of Tutorial Island with the first few minutes of RuneScape 3's tutorial.
But some heroes have more unlikely origins. This is the story of one such hero. This is your story.
I need to talk to you about something very important, laddie. You're special, laddie. You have talents and abilities beyond those of ordinary folk. You're special, laddie. Special, laddie. Special.
I'm sure Jagex's marketing team compares these two tutorials and goes, oh, this one makes player feel bad, so it's badder, but this one makes player feel gooder, and that player that feels the gooder keeps playing. Yes, there's a good chance that more people are going to stick around for a tutorial like this, but in exchange, you've sacrificed such a crucial element of the game, its sense of progression. You're not supposed to be told you're special. That's something you're supposed to earn over time. You aspire to be great. You didn't start off great. If you have a player slaying zombies, killing witches, and getting standing ovations in the first 5 minutes, where do you go from there? You hand them all these things and you destroy the integrity of earning an experience like that. On Tutorial Island, you start at the absolute bottom. You burn shrimp on an open fire, but it means that every step you take from now onwards is a step forward. Clear and steady progression is what made RuneScape such an addictive game. After you catch some more shrimp and successfully cook it on the fire, you'll be instructed to head down the path to a little house. Here you will find the Master Chef. Welcome newcomer. I am the Master Chef, Lev. It is here that I will teach you how to cook food truly fit for a king. I already know how to cook. Brian had taught me just now. You call that cooking? Some shrimp on an open log fire? Oh, no. I'm going to teach you the fine art of cooking bread. And already, 20 seconds later, there is a little bit of progression happening. This guy just completely dismissed the thing you just did as inferior to the thing he's about to teach you. All of a sudden, cooking this bread seems just a little more important than cooking that shrimp on the fire. It's not that big of a deal, but it's still a step up from what you were doing before. Anyway, the guy teaches you how to mix flour and water to get dough. Then he gets you to use the dough on the oven to get some bread. He also teaches you how to access the music tab, which is full of RuneScape's absolutely massive soundtrack, something I will definitely be talking about at a later date. Once you walk out the door to head to the next location, the game quickly teaches you about emotes and running. At the next house, you learn about quests from the quest guide. Notice that the quest guide only tells you about quests and doesn't waste your time by starting you on a bullshit beginner's quest automatically. After that, head down the ladder and into the cave. Continue down the path and you'll find yourself talking to this colorful mining instructor. He'll tell you to inspect both rocks on either side of the cave in order to find out what ore they contain. After you've done that, he'll give you a pickaxe to mine the 2 ores. As a player, you might notice right off the bat that the pickaxe he gave you looks pretty lame in comparison to the shiny blue one that the instructor is holding. But they look exactly the same, it's just one happens to be a different color. Color is pretty important in RuneScape. Notice how every single item you've gotten and every single item you're ever going to get on Tutorial Island is colored with these dark browns and oranges. I don't want to get into it now, but just keep that in mind as we go forward because it's important. After you mine the 2 ores, you can use either of them on the furnace to smelt a bronze bar. The mining instructor will then hand you a hammer in which you can use with the bronze bar and the nearby anvil to make a dagger. Once you're finished, you'll be moving on to the next area through the gate. Here you will meet the combat instructor. The first thing you might notice is that when you right click on the combat instructor, it'll show that he has a level of 146. Now, combat levels haven't been taught yet. In fact, I don't even think they ever mentioned them on Tutorial Island at all. But if you've been doing any playing around up to this point, you might have been right-clicking other players, in which case you'd see that they all show up as level 3, which would obviously imply that you yourself are also level 3. So seeing a guy who's 143 levels higher than you gives you a general idea of how strong this guy is. The funny thing is that combat levels are usually reserved for other players and NPCs that you can attack, but here they give the combat instructor a level for the sole purpose of you seeing it. It's there to show the player an obtainable goal and to highlight the difference between a high level player and a low level player. You just made this tiny little brown knife and this guy is rocking this fancy red shield and a big ass sword. There's a clear distinction between the two of you and the game wants you to feel it. Hi, my name is insert player name here. Do I look like I care? To me, you're just another newcomer who thinks they're ready to fight. I am Vanica, I think, the greatest swordsman alive. It's just a small detail in the guy's character, but it immediately gives you the sense that you're talking to someone with a lot more experience than yourself. And it matters a little bit because the game didn't spend a bunch of time telling you Anyways, the first thing the combat instructor teaches you is how to wield a weapon. You equip your weapon and then he tells you that the dagger you just equipped, the dagger you spent all that time back there learning to make for what you assumed to be was for this very moment in the tutorial, the dagger you're semi-proud of because it's your very first weapon, is inadequate and won't protect you at all. He proceeds to give you an actual sword and shield. Progression. Equip them and head into the pits where you will fight a giant rat. Not a zombie, not an ancient witch, a giant rat. You're bad. After you've killed a rat, talk to the combat instructor again and he'll move on to using the bow and arrow. Once you've equipped the bow and arrows and used it to kill a rat outside the cage, you can move on. Climb up the ladder and you'll find yourself outside again. From this point onwards, it's much of the same, so there's not much else for me to pick apart. You learn about banks, which are places to store your money and items. You learn the basic way of making money. Brother Brace teaches you about prayer and how to use the friends list. And finally, the magic instructor will teach you how to cast a basic air spell on a chicken because you're shit. Once you've done that, you'll be at the end of Tutorial Island, and you can get the magic instructor to teleport you off the island to the mainland. Now, let's look back at the 3 strengths of Tutorial Island that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. The first was its ability to teach the player a lot of the game's basics in a short amount of time. Tutorial Island takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete, and from the time you start to the time you finish, you learn a lot of different things. This is made possible because the game doesn't waste your time. It doesn't have you running around on a bunch of meaningless quests just to get a point across. It knows it's a tutorial and it knows you're there to learn. Once you learn something, you're immediately moving on to the next thing. The second strength I mentioned was that the game detaches the tutorial from the rest of the game. In this case, I mean it literally. It's called Tutorial Island because, you guessed it, it takes place on an island, completely detached from the rest of the game world. And once you teleport off the island, you can never go back. Consequently, you never see another tutorial after this again. I think one of the dumbest things RuneScape has ever done is have the tutorials extended to the mainland of the game, completely destroying the adventurous aspect of going there in the first place. Tutorial Island exists for the tutorial, and it does its best to separate itself as much as possible from the real thing. This is something I'll be getting more into in the next video. The third strength that I already went over is its ability to establish you as a low-level player. For whatever reason, studios now have this obsession with trying to make the player feel like they're really special, in fear that they might drop the game out of boredom in the first 5 minutes. But I for one don't think there's any reason to try and make a tutorial any more ambitious than it needs to be. You inflate the importance of the main character or a subplot, and you deflate the importance of the smaller things a player gets to experience, like making their first weapon. All of a sudden, these things are meaningless because the focus is no longer on you learning that skill. It's about defeating some ancient power. It's fine to feel like a noob. I'd argue that it's necessary to feel that way in order to feel any sense of accomplishment down the line. I just wish that the new developers at Jagex could embrace that idea instead of trying to distance themselves from it. Is Tutorial Island the perfect MMO tutorial? No, there are many tweaks and changes that I would make myself if I was in charge, but that's all it needed. Tweaks and changes. I don't think Jagex should have ever completely replaced it, and seeing what they replaced it with tells me they had no respect for what Tutorial Island did successfully. So the basics of Tutorial Island have been learned, but the real learning experience starts when you teleport to the mainland. The next video will be following the first steps the player takes into this world, which I think are some of the most interesting moments to deconstruct in the entire game. I hope you will join me, I guess.